Civil War and Reconstruction. I'm Tiferet Ani. Feel free to call me Tiff. I'm a teacher, a curriculum developer, a teacher educator. One of my most important roles is the DC area Educators for Social Justice secondary work group. I definitely invite people to check that out and join. We have groups for every level. And so with that, we'll go ahead and dive right in. The first, I think we're going to do the first question together as a whole group. And just so everybody knows, this lesson is based on, of course, Black families and their importance in terms of the 13 principles, but it's also aligned to the Teaching Hard History framework that it was put out by Learning for Justice. And we're going to, again, look at how enslaved and free people maintain kinship bonds across time and space in the 19th century. And so the first question that I want to you can unmute, you can put in the chat, that I want to sort of engage you is, what stories or evidence, source material are you aware of or do you teach that demonstrate the strength of Black kinship bonds and love despite the assault of slavery, white supremacy, and racial terror? So thinking about that, perseverance, family ties, resistance. It doesn't have to be a specific source or story. Or there's a source type that you use. Ooh, family reunions, absolutely. How many people teach slavery or this time period in their lessons? Businesses, yeah, economic success is great. All right, so hopefully, Black churches and music, great. That's exactly, that's wonderful. Okay, so I think we're going to see a lot more different types of sources in this lesson. Quotes, ooh, I like that. That hopefully will be useful in terms of bringing this out more. So just some context. We're not going to spend the majority of this, but I just want to give some context, especially for the Maryland region. And this, of course, is happening in Virginia as well. We have, during this time period, the domestic slave trade, right? The legal kidnapping of people from Africa and bringing them to the United States is abolished by Congress in 1808. And what starts to happen is family groups being broken up and people being taken out of the state to fuel, the settler colonial project, right? As land is wrested from indigenous nations in the South, in the Southeast. This is happening. And so I just have here the total number of people who are moved, almost 1 million people being broken up, and then specific looks at Maryland and then Montgomery County, which is where I teach and work, as do so many of you, because I think it's really important to make this local, right? Sometimes when we think about slavery, we're thinking about cotton plantations in the Deep South and not really looking at what was happening in our own county. And this data is readily available. You have the slides. And so in the title, what's linked in is this great website from the New American History, the University of Richmond, and you can find this for your own local area. So if you don't teach in Montgomery County, you can look up your own county to make that, what your students need based on your local history. And so just to see kind of an impact of this over time, right, for Maryland and then Montgomery County itself, you can see that really the high point of this in Maryland is the 1810s. And this continues, into the 1850s. And so this is a very disruptive process, but what I want to demonstrate, and cruel and tragic, what I want to demonstrate is the ways that Black kinship bonds sort of were maintained, and people persevered in this. So I don't know if you want to let me know in the chat if you've ever heard of this site, Freedom on the Move. But this is a fantastic database of advertisements that show evidence of self-liberation, right? People, self-emancipating, fleeing bondage. And so you can search it by states, by personal characteristics. It's a really fabulous source for students. And, they're really small text and they've been transcribed. So they're really good for students of all levels. And so I'm just going to show you one specific ad here. And you can see the original copy on the right, and then the transcription on the left of the screen. And this is from 1794, printed in a North Carolina journal. And so we have ran away from the subscriber the 30th of May last. In Moore County, about 30 miles above Fayetteville, a likely Negro man named Bob, about 19 years old, 5 feet 8 or 9 inches high, dark complexion, thin visage, large thick lips, and very smiling countenance. He lately came from Maryland, and I expect he will endeavor to get there again. He had on when he went away an Osnabrig's shirt and striped country cloth overalls. There is a probability that he's by some means obtained a pass. Any person who would deliver him to me or secure him in any jail so that I get him again shall be handsomely rewarded. So if you want to unmute or put in the chat, what are you learning about, what does this tell you about Bob? Even though this is not a source created by Bob, it is a great resource to learn a snapshot of his life and who he is and what his goals were. So what do you know? What do you learn from this?
I will say the smiling countenance is a very interesting thing to put in an ad. I'm not sure what I'm learning from that, but that it's just interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
They must think he has some level of intelligence because he has by some means obtained a pass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. And I see some great things in the chat that Bob had a geographic bond with Maryland, and that Bob is resourceful and determined. Excellent, right? Yeah, go ahead, please.
Oh, sorry. The fact that he's fairly young, 19, I would say is fairly young.
Yeah. Yeah, and so we're probably getting, he's probably sort of doesn't have family in North Carolina, would be a guess, right? And he's certainly young and able to take this journey. And so thinking about this is one of my favorite lines in that ad, the destination inference. Why do you think Bob is trying to get back to Maryland? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. These are good inferences. My likely guess is if he lately came from Maryland, which of course this obscures, the role of this of the slave trade. That would be family, right? Trying to return to family. And I think that's so interesting that he's going back to another state where slavery is alive and well, right? He's not necessarily trying to go to freedom. He's trying to be returned to his family. And I think that shows us a lot, right? About the strength of family bonds. And, he's making this choice about where he's going to go. He's planning something, getting the pass, as someone said. So it's a really powerful testament, right, to his own agency in making decisions and to his own resistance. And so I just have some great examples from different decades about Black love and kinship. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up some breakout rooms and put you in different rooms. If you're in number, we're going to be in 5 different rooms. Okay. If you're in number 1, you're going to start in the beginning and look at that 1838 source. Okay. If you're in number 5, you're going to look at that source from 1882. And what I want you to do, they're all fairly short. Some of, I think Josiah Henson's might be the longest one, you can skim it. But pay attention, what does it tell you about Black kinship, okay? Specifically in terms of that context. Any questions before we go in the breakout rooms?
Do we need to get the documents from that same Google Doc?
Yes, the link is in the slide. Whatever is highlighted there, that's where the link can be found to see the document. And so kinship, we're thinking about family, but it's not just biological family, right? Thinking about a kinship network, we're also thinking about chosen family or found family, especially in terms of if family is broken up, right? You have other people in the community who would step into some of these roles, right? And so, yes, thanks for putting the slides in again. Yes, support system, right? I think that's a great look, right? And it's people who you have a bond to, right? Regardless of legality, regardless of biological blood, people who you have ties to, who support you, absolutely. All right, we open the breakout rooms. Please go ahead and introduce yourselves, take a look at the document, and then we'll come back. I think I'll probably give about 7 minutes for this. I know it's going to be quick.
I want to share something that Kim said in our room, or not Kim, something that Anne said in our room. We were on the first source, and the same language was used as the previous one we've all looked at, where it said, the pleasing countenance, and whether that was sort of like humanizing or belittling. And Anne, I don't know if you want to speak your own words, or I can. You said it's sort of like saying, that's a good one. And like how maybe that would be like a provocation to get this, to get support for this advertisement.
Can you repeat the phrase that you're looking at?
Very pleasing countenance.
Oh, okay. It's there again.
And in talking, stutters very much. Yeah, that's interesting. I think Andrew Coulson, right? He's trying to help people make an accurate identification, right? But what does that term mean to him, and what would it mean to others? I think that's a very important point. Thank you. So basically what I'm trying to show is that, from any period that we're talking about, right, we can obviously see this evidence of kinship bonds, love for your people, relatives, your support system. And this definitely, it's really great and affirming, because some of the myths or lies, right, that enslavers have always told is that, there aren't these family bonds, right? And so this kind of just presents the obvious truth in primary sources that, yes, people had a huge desire to maintain their families, to be with their families. And just a quick note about Last Seen. Those of you who looked at the Betsy Dodd advertisement, that's from this database called Last Seen, people finding their families. They're actually placing these advertisements in newspapers, right? And the link to Last Seen is in the slides. You can search this database again in ways that you would from Freedom on the Move. And you can see the tags show common themes, right? And so if you wanted to find all sources placed by parents or people looking for siblings, you could just click on the tab, on the tag, and that would all come up. So I think it's a very wonderful resource to look at, because, it might be 20, 30 years after emancipation, and people are still placing advertisements to find family that they were separated from. What I wanted to share with you is now two different learning activities, one that really focuses on some of the background that we've done so far, and the other one really looks at Reconstruction, and it is aligned to the Zinn Education Project, Teaching Reconstruction, Making Reconstruction Campaign, Making Reconstruction Visible campaign. And so if you, I'm gonna pop this link into the chat. This is one of the first assignments that I would do, in sort of pre-Civil War, teaching about the antebellum period. And what I have students do here is, the whole point is to look at the impact of the domestic slave trade. I think sometimes, and I know from Maryland state standards, it's not emphasized enough, right? The nature of that and what it meant. And so what students would do in this activity is they would choose one piece of evidence from each of these columns. So they would choose one Freedom on the Move ad. They would choose one sort of narrative writing piece. Some of you read the Josiah Henson excerpt, which is one of the options. For those of you who have gone to the National Museum of African American History and Culture, Ashley's sack is on display there. And so that's another sort of format of looking at an artifact, a material object. And then January 1st, 1808 by Jesmond Ward, that's some poetry that was in the New York Times 1619 project. So students had this sort of choice of these different types of narratives, and then they would choose one last scene ad. And so with those three sources, they would do some, historical thinking about the sourcing, what evidence it has about the impact, and what evidence it has about the reaction, right? Or the resistance to the slave trade. And then the final piece is them, again, pulling this all together to look at family connections and kinship bonds, and giving them this choice of how they want to present their information. And so one of the last scene actually had a youth art competition. And so the image that's on this last slide, or this slide about from here, this is one of the winners, where the student used sort of cut up strips from last scene to create something. And so I love this type of assignment where students are given choice and they have the different modalities of how they want to present what they learned, as well as being able to choose what sources interest them. And so I did put this lesson plan that a lot of this comes from, was created for Freedom on the Move. Eventually it'll be up on their website, but it's not there yet. So I wanted to just put the entire lesson plan with all the links to the teacher directions in the chat for you. It's also linked in that slides, but I'm going to copy it in just so that you have it and can use all the elements of it and see how that might work in your own classes. I wanted to I'm going to do a preview of the next activity I wanted to share with you, and then have a bigger breakout room with more people to actually digest and look at some of these two activities. The other one that I wanted to share is a resource for making Reconstruction visible and having students actually upload their information to the Zinn Education map. And so, we know it can be hard to find these sites. So what I did for my students is I made a list with some resources of all of these different sites in Maryland that relate, in Montgomery County specifically, that relate to Reconstruction. And so I have schools that were set up, post emancipation, of course, churches that were a really important community institution. I did include some of that hard history during Reconstruction or immediately after Reconstruction. There were, 3 known lynchings in Montgomery County, and so students can look at some of those. But these are all sort of like things that are in their neighborhoods that they may not know about, and it's organized like geographically, alphabetically, so they can sort of find, what might be close to them and their school. What they would do with these is then create a template for a historic marker. And this is an assignment that the teacher could grade, but this also is sort of their outline for them putting this information on the Zinn Education project map, so it's accessible to an authentic audience, to sort of a national community. And so the way I went about this is having a look at some examples of actual historic markers that are in Maryland, and seeing, okay, well, what are the characteristics? What should a clear marker have? And then, doing the research using some of those links about the site they chose, and then creating a marker. And this aligns to what the Zinn Education Project asked them to submit, to this map. And I don't know if you've seen it, but it's really a wonderful resource and a way for students to feel like they're doing something that matters, not just for their teacher to grade, but for anybody to sort of see. They would then take their information from that and go to this online form and input it, right? The event or place, the description, the sources they used, all of these things, and submit that. And so then it has sort of this really actionable component that shows that it really matters, right? And then it's on this map, and anybody who's looking at it can see all of these different sites, right? And so that was just kind of one way to sort of scaffold it and help students access this. Are there any questions about like either of these two activities before we go into breakout rooms, and just give you time to sort of like sit and look at them? And then also, discuss this question, like what from here might you use with your own students, and talk with other educators about this.
Tiff, I have a question.
Yeah.
How did you create the list of sites? Like where did you source the list of sites from Montgomery County if we wanted to do it for the location of where our schools are, where our children?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I used, most localities have a historical society. And so a lot of these places I was able to sort of piece together from that historical society. And some of it was also just sort of like knowing, oh, there is a historic Black community here in Scotland. How can I get information about that? So kind of just, and looking at sort of some of the Freedmen's Bureau records also to figure out, well, what sites were connected to the Freedmen's Bureau in Montgomery County. And so it was a kind of a lot of research, but I definitely recommend like the Historic Society as sort of a first step to find some of these locations for sure. That's a great question, Nicole. All right, I think what I'm going to do is give you some time to chat with fellow educators and explore these two learning activities a little more with this question of thinking about, again, classroom application. How might you use these things? So I'm going to open the breakout rooms, and we'll probably have about 10 minutes in this breakout room. I'm seeing that Deborah has put that the next session starts at 11:15, and I certainly don't want you to be late for that. There is an evaluation that Deborah's asking everyone to fill out. And yes, if anyone who wants to stay and just ask a few more questions, that's totally great. I'll give you that option of like, do you want to be in a breakout room? And I think I'll probably make like 3 breakout rooms. So there's like 4 or 5 people per room. So you don't have to accept the invitation though. If you don't want to, you can stay here and ask some questions. Yeah, Kim, feel free to unmute and go ahead with your questions.
Hi, I have known of your work for a while, so I'm like excited to meet you, but I'm wondering how we could adapt some of these lessons for elementary students. And it's something that I've become interested in. My daughter and I were involved in the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition, and then we went to an exhibit at AU where we learned about these different African-American communities in Montgomery County that I know I didn't know about, and I know that our students may not know about. Now I'm working in a school very close to Laytonsville. So I really would love to figure out I don't teach social studies, I'm a reading specialist, but I would love to figure out how we can bring some of these lessons to elementary school students so they understand that we have historic communities right here in their own backyards.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that, the 4th and 5th grade curriculums tie a lot into these things. And so working with the grade level teachers for those in your building to say, well, we're talking about slavery. We want to uplift resistance, right? And we want to show people stories. And so, teachers could curate just some of these ads for Freedom on the Move. I think they could definitely be used with elementary students.
Yeah,
I think
so.
You might want to take some ads and actually do some vocabulary front loading or have some definitions, right? Like visage, countenance. I mean, those are some kind of older terms, but students could definitely look at them and think about who is the person, right? And there's an amazing artist who did some work I can't remember his name right now, but I can definitely get back to you. He did this work where he created ads about himself and put his own illustrations. And he basically asked his friends, like, how would you describe me? And he copied this antebellum style. And so thinking about sort of making like students can illustrate some of the people, but think about like making it sort of like a hero showcase, right? Like, type of thing. Or writing like their own perspective, maybe of like, wanted, like bring this enslaver to justice type of deal.
Right.
And so with the sites, I think you could certainly sort of make that a lesson of like looking at their local community. I know I had some things for Lightonsville here. Let me, because that is like a fascinating and amazing community.
Yeah.
Where is it? I think it's
Here it is. Yeah.
So you using these sources, right?
Yeah.
I have like a video, which is great, and this Washington Post article, which actually looks at like some later issues of like segregation. But I think you could definitely use some of these with students and thinking about freedom, like what do you want, and looking at this story of like the individual person, right, who like supports this community. He's not just thinking about himself, right? He's building community institutions. And I'm glad Susan is here because Susan's from the Tacoma Park Historical Society and did some great things with Tacoma Park. And some of the youth groups that were set up there. Susan, do you want to speak to any of the work that you did? Oh, you're muted. You want to unmute?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what we're working on right now is doing these oral histories with older people in the Black community who grew up during segregation and the decades that followed. But, we don't know that much about antebellum Tacoma Park or who would have been living in that area, even though there are a few very early photographs of African Americans, but we don't really know what the genesis of them is. And some of the documents you've suggested could be just tremendously helpful. Some of the resources in starting for kids to be able to track those stories.
Susan, did you do any oral histories with anyone who grew up in Lightonsville?
No, only in Tacoma Park. The only thing that would pertain particularly to Lightonsville is that in the late 50s, the city finally built a small community center in the Black community. And it became a kind of social center for people who were living in all the communities in the southern part of the county. And really was a meeting ground. And I know that some people from Lightonsville were involved in that, but that's about all I know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that community center has, I haven't been in a while, but had a great historical exhibit about how it came to be. So,
yeah.
And I'd definitely reach out to Montgomery History. They do have a great website.
Yeah,
That was sort of
they
the
do.
first stop for me to
Yeah.
gather some of this information. And I feel like if they have something that's not digitized, they could certainly locate it for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think I've been on that website before.
And even I wonder, you know, having students do their own oral histories, right? Finding somebody in their community and asking some questions about their childhood growing up in that community. That would be a wonderful experience for students too.
Absolutely.
And that is something that we've just produced, which is a 18-minute video for kids. More high school and middle school, but I think it could still be adapted for younger children. In using some clips from the interviews we've done and encouraging them to go out and do their own oral histories.
That's great. I love that.
It's called Doing Oral History.
I wrote that down. I wrote your contact information down, Susan. I appreciate that.
Now, Susan, is that available on your website or?
Not yet. And
Okay.
it literally was finished just a few weeks ago.
Okay.
But it will be. And I did get a note to send information to Vanessa Williams about it. So yeah, this, you know, we really want to be spreading it far and wide, absolutely as quickly as possible.
I am ready to put it into the curriculum for 9th grade for Montgomery County.
Fabulous, fabulous.
So Tiff, can I ask you, are these lessons required lessons in the social studies curriculum or optional? Like, I'm just curious what happens in the middle school. and high
Yeah. So the Making Reconstruction Visible is in the actual curriculum. Of course, with our lessons, they're available to teachers and they can kind of, you know, make it their own and that sort of thing. So, you know, I couldn't say with 100% certainty did every single child engage in this, but it is in the curriculum. I have trained teachers on it. The lesson that I showed with some of the antebellum stuff, the domestic slave trade, that's something that I recently wrote. I'm going to link it into the curriculum so that it is available there. What is required in 8th grade is we have a literature circle with different narratives by enslaved people, and they read one of 8, and it's a longer excerpt, and they're looking for all these different themes to learn more about slavery through the lens of a person, and they engage in sort of literature circles to hear from people who read other things. But I'll certainly be adding this piece in, because while we do have, we do look at briefly at the domestic slave trade, I didn't focus enough on it locally, so this is going to be a great added thing. But as I make new things, I put it in the curriculums.
That's great. I love the local connections. That really brings it home for students. Thank you.
Yeah, super important. All right, so I think we have about 4 more minutes left. What I would like to, I'm going to stop my screen share. What I would like to do is just hear from you about your discussions. What things might be useful for you to implement? How might you add your own twist to this? I'd love to hear any reactions about the materials that I shared. Yes. Any summaries from what you discussed in your breakout rooms or thoughts that you're thinking?
Hi, that was ample waiting time. It was so funny. I was in a workshop just recently and with a lot of educators, and we all did that wait time, and then like 5 people started talking at the same time. So it's interesting. Hi, I'm Susan Kelly. I'm an educator. I go into the jails in Montgomery County. And prior to even getting in the jails, there's a lot of this type of work that we would do with our students. And it was an interesting observation is some were very interested and motivated and wanted to know, and others are wanted to more live or operate, do assignments, etc. in dystopias, which I find interesting. It's almost like the reality was a little bit too much. But not always, just certain kids that I found that was interesting. But this could be applied. I'd have to print out every single resource, every single link, because there is no internet access. But it is something that I have found that students and families love
being empowered with that information, that it's being acknowledged, it's being talked about, it's being discussed, it's becoming more of a, a reality that this is something we don't ever want to return back to or get connected to. And apologies, I'm not on camera. I tried to be on when I am speaking. But excellent. These are tremendous resources. It is such a well put together lesson. This is totally, totally awesome. So thank you very, very, very much. I love it. It could be applied to every age group and program and type of class. And it could be, it can be modified as well. So thank you. It's excellent.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you for sharing your experience. One thing that my students were fascinated by with Freedom on the Move is a lot of the advertisements are actually put by jailers who have just picked people up, right? The assumption is that if you are Black, you are enslaved and you're wandering around without a pass, they just take you. And they're basically putting ads in to say, someone picked this person up, otherwise, the assumption is we'll make a profit, we'll sell this person. And so the complicity of the criminal justice system in enslavement might be something that would interest your students as well. I don't know what kind of censorship happens in education there, but that might be powerful. All right, we have one more minute here. I'm gonna just put the evaluation back in the link back in. Yes, I think that would be a great project of making, and maybe Nicole and I can work together on this, making a list of Reconstruction sites with some resources for DC. That would be a great thing I want to do. Okay, Paige, you want to take a group photo? I know this is like the end here.
If I may, I just want to quickly say, I think on behalf of everyone, thanking Tiff for an amazing presentation.
Yes.
So virtual celebrations for Tiff. This is so great. And yes, please make sure you fill out the eval. And I know I want to be respectful of time. So if everyone is okay, we can do a quick screenshot of this just to document this session. So if everyone would be ready, I can take it in 3, 2, 1. True. Okay, one more, if it'll let me, in 3, 2, 1. There we go. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, and please enjoy your second session as well.
Thank you for joining us. Have a great rest of the day. The second session starts at 11:15, so you have a quick break time if you need it.
Thanks again, Tiff.
Thank you so much, Tiff. This is awesome. Thank you.
Pleasure. Nice to meet you all.
Great.
Thank you.